A very warm welcome to this World Game Changers podcast, where your host, Paul D. Lowe, embraces many crucial conversations that compassionately contribute towards creating a better life and world. Paul's intention's very simple: to help get people's inspirational insights and motivational messages out into the world, so others may benefit.
Hello listeners, and welcome to this World Game Changers podcast episode. Today I'm joined by a returning guest, a lady by the name of Rebecca Wheele. Rebecca, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Hi Paul. Hi listeners.
I don't know why, but I wanted to say mom there, which is something I say quite a lot. I used to say exclusively to our American guests. But more recently, anyway, I'm waffling, listeners. I'm waffling, and I'm speaking a little bit of truth there. I'm showing vulnerability around, because apparently podcast hosts aren't supposed to waffle, and they're supposed to be very on point and very this and very that. Well, my truth is that that's not who I am, or maybe it is, which brings in a nice title, I think, that Rebecca and I have agreed to speak about on air now, called The Naked Truth. Now that word naked, I've got my own thoughts around that. Rebecca, what does those three words mean to you straight away? The naked truth.
So yeah, lots comes to mind with the naked truth, and in a sense there's different parts to it, because naked, I think generally in society naked is we all wear clothes and we don't walk around naked, and there's a kind of maybe a slight uncomfortableness around that. And so actually being physically naked, but there's also being naked in a vulnerable sense, in a terms of being open and being honest and truthful, because truth is not always a pretty thing. It's not always it can be, we've got the cliche of the ugly truth, but it's, that holds some water, because, I think truth is truth, right? Truth is just truth. And we don't always want to look at that sometimes, in life. We can run away from that or avoid that. And so yeah, I think the naked truth has many different kind of components to it. That's my thoughts so far.
Okay. And it is, listeners, is it not, the words, the conditioning that goes with the word, like naked, for example, that we're, it is conditioning that, it brings up different things to different people, and most of it is like, well, I can't be naked, I can't do that. Well, who's talking about what particular context? It's interesting how the mind automatically defaults to that physical nakedness.
Yeah, exactly.
And and all these cliches that kind of then filter into our conditioned upbringing, and the lessons we learned from childhood and from adults and people in authority that we're led to believe are right. And the naked truth, is it not, that was those instructions, those lessons taught, usually from a place of good intention, usually, not always, even with our parents. That's a reflection of the truth. Yeah. That's a reflection of their truth that they impart upon us. It doesn't make it right, it doesn't make it wrong, it makes it the truth.
Yeah.
And I think for me, Rebecca, the whole concept of the naked truth is my truth. No matter what you say to me, depending on the level of trust that we share and the intimacy that we share, not just you personally, but I'm generalizing now, but is based on that. It's almost like peeling the layers back to say, do you know what, I really do trust you, and your truth can become my truth. And the two truths dance, as opposed to this mainstream way of thinking, don't really trust him or her. And this brings in the whole concept of learning to trust the one person that really, really matters, yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, to the extent that we trust ourselves is also, I think, to the extent we trust the world, and that they feed into each other. But it perhaps it all comes from that place of how much we trust ourselves, to how much we can trust life and other people, and because that's that relationship with ourselves, and that trust, you know, is the more we can trust ourselves, then the more we can infuse and put the energy of trust out into the world, and it can manifest in all everything that we do.
Yeah. And it is a reflection of ourselves ultimately, isn't it? You know, that energy that we dance with as an individual in those, you know, in those private moments, well, not necessarily, you know, in every day, you know, when it's just me, myself and I, my truth, never mind what I'm telling the outside world. I could tell the outside world I'm the heavyweight champion of the world, and some people might actually believe it. But what's the raw truth? What truth, when I look in that mirror and look at that guy in my case, what truth do I see? What's my naked truth? Never mind what whistles and bells and, you know, padding I'm putting on top, you know, as part of storytellers. And I've spent, you know, a previous life doing, when I was out with the boys, we were great storytellers. None of the events were true, but they were a great story. Well, actually, that's not strictly true. But there was a lot of creativity. I think they call in the fisherman's tale. You know, you hear about fishermen going fishing. Oh, I caught this 20-pound carp. Yeah. Did you, George? Yeah. I was actually fishing with you, and it was like a 2-ounce stickleback that you caught, not, you know, the fisherman's tale. And that's great, isn't it? I mean, that creativity, you know, so long as it's with good intent, that's fine.
Absolutely. And, you know, I guess there's, that brings into the kind of, into my mind about like the different kind of roles that we play in life, the different masks that we can, you know, inevitably wear, which perhaps, you know, I think I've always thought of this, you know, idea of like, oh, you know, wearing the mask and as a kind of protection, that's something that we need to take off, which I do think that that's true. But at the same time, you know, there are there's nothing really wrong with that if it's, you know, we are all dancing with each other in different dynamics and in different ways, and of course we are going to be slightly different with, you know, as a mother role, you know, versus in our job there are going to be those different kind of like energies that we bring. And so, yeah, maybe we all have kind of just different facets to ourselves, but there's nothing wrong with that. And there's, you know, to a degree, I would say.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, in terms of our nakedness, to keep, you know, that metaphor in the mind, that, you know, we're not going to be naked in front of everyone we see. We're not, you know, we kind of peel back the layers depending on the intimacy and the trust we have with another. Yeah. And I often use the dartboard analogy, listeners, of, you know, this, as Rebecca says quite rightly, there are people in our lives that sit in, you know, various positions on that dartboard. So on the outside layer, it might be, you know, I don't know, the guy or the girl in the supermarket on the checkout that you say hello to. You recognize them by face. They're friendly, they're polite, professional. Hello, good morning, that kind of thing. You know, there's a certain dance and a certain exchange of energy that's taking place there, because obviously as trained staff, they're taught to be pleasant and polite, etc., etc. And that infuses some warmth into our, you know, just a simple hello, how are you today? You know, and using the person's name. You know, I don't know, for example, I go to the Tesco checkout. Oh, good morning, Penelope. It's nice to see your smiling face. How are you? You know, Penelope feels good because her name's been used rather than just, you know, there's my money. Yeah. See you tomorrow kind of thing. Now I've paid for my milk.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so there's that personal element. And then as we start moving inwards through friends, you know, professional colleagues, close friends, family, and then the real soulful relationships, which for me is the bullseye. That's really where the naked truth can be shared, can be co-created, in that intimacy of the bullseye.
Yeah.
But one would say that you're not going to share that intimacy with the boy or the girl on the checkout, for example. There's different layers, isn't there?
Yeah, different layers. And perhaps in the very, very center of it all is our relationship with ourselves and being truthful to ourselves. Because if we can't be truthful to ourselves, or if there's anything that we're not being truthful to ourselves about, that's going to be there's no one else that we can be truthful really with. That's where it starts.
Absolutely. So what would you say then, by way of kind of inspiring our listeners, Rebecca? I mean, could you give an example of your naked truth, whatever that may be? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Gosh.
Big question, no pressure.
Big question. I mean, yeah, for me, something that I is a truth of mine is that I get very nervous about things. But it's interesting because even as I speak, even as I bring it into the space, I'm getting nervous about being nervous, which is kind of
a double whammy.
Yeah. So, and I think that in my life, I've kind of, tried to put on this mask, this professional, I'm kind of, I've got everything figured out. And there's this kind of professionalism that I've kind of adopted through my work, even things like having a phone voice. And, I suppose being on the face of customer service roles a lot, I've kind of had to adopt that anyway, but that's kind of become intertwined with myself too closely. And so really in the last kind of couple of years, we've done so many deep dives and, with, all sorts of different things, has been peeling back those layers. And it is exposing kind of a nakedness, a kind of of who I am, because that facade, I don't know if that's a bit strong a word, but, that kind of professional air of that mask was protecting me in a sense, from actually my just who I am. And it's quite a vulnerable space to be in, just kind of taking everything off and just saying, this is who I am, and I'm just going to sit with that and be that, rather than trying to be something else to be validated in the space, or to kind of look to the external, to others for that validation, rather than just being who I am and just seeing where that lands. It doesn't matter where that lands, but that, just in that expression of myself. So that's a kind of truth, is that I am kind of challenged a lot by nerves and but it's a process of experience as well.
Absolutely. And I tell you what was landing there, listeners, as Rebecca was speaking. So you remember how at the top of this thread, this podcast episode, we spoke around the reaction, the mainstream reaction to words like naked, and what it conjures up generally. And of course we shouldn't generalize, apparently, but this whole kind of power of words and what it means, words have energy, words have power. But when you were speaking there, Rebecca, what came through to me, and it'd have the same meaning but it'd get there a different way. What if we swap the word naked for vulnerable? Because it's the same thing, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
You know, and if you spoke to a room of people, not you specifically, anyone spoke to a room of people, say there's 100 people in there, and you made the request, right, and people, we'd like to encourage you to be naked, as opposed to, right then people, we'd like to encourage you to be vulnerable. Whole new different perception.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never done this, and I don't know what the stats are, but I would venture the numbers or the connotation associated with being vulnerable is going to be far, far, far higher than it is being naked. I just kind of throw that in there. So I suppose it brings in the power of words.
Yeah. Yeah.
The power of words.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Rebecca, before we close this one off?
I mean, yeah, that's interesting. Words holding power and energy. And we probably also we have different ideas about these words and different experiences with these words, and so again, it kind of brings in. I know we spoke about this on a previous podcast. Is perception as well. So, we're all looking at it from our own perspective. So it may mean different things to different people. So, yeah.
How can we find out more about you, Rebecca? How can we reach out to you?
Okay, so if you go to my website, it's RebeccaWheele.com, and you've got the contact details on there. So, yeah, please reach out if you would like to reach out. I'd love to have a chat. And, yeah, thank you.
Superb. So there you have it, listeners. You know what I'm going to say now. I'm going to be totally naked. I'm going to be totally vulnerable. And I'm going to be signing off by saying, remember, the world's changing. How will you respond?
Thanks very much for listening to this World Game Changers podcast episode. Hopefully you found it interesting and helpful. Drop a line to paul@worldgamechangers.org with any thoughts or questions you may have, and he'll be more than happy to respond. Remember, the world is changing. How will you respond?